Merhaba, hello, good morning. My name is Joe O'Hara and I'm President of the European Educational Research Association, EERA. It is an honour to speak with you, albeit virtually, at this 12th International Conference of Educational Research organised by the Turkish Educational Research Association. As you will have just seen in our video, the European Educational Research Association, or ERA, is an association of associations with 42 national and regional members from 35 different countries. It also has 33 academic networks which engage in significant research across a whole range of fields. One of the most important of our research associations is the Turkish Educational Research Association. It has been an active and important member of ERA for a number of years and was part of the group that helped organise the ESER, the European Conference of Educational Research, in Istanbul in recent years. Besides hosting the conference, members of the Turkish Educational Research Association have taken an active part in ERA at all levels. And at this time, I'd like to pay particular tribute to the President, Mustafa Yunus Eryaman, for all of his work, both at ERA level, but also in representing your association at the World Education Research Association, at the European Union, and at various other different fora. Yunus has been an enormous supporter of ERA and the work of education research within Europe, and it is good to have this chance to acknowledge his work. I'm particularly happy to have the opportunity to take a small part in the work of your conference. Reading the programme, I think, shows the significant diversity of research and practice interests that you as a research community have. With over 30 divisions and 8 SIGs, the Turkish Educational Research Association clearly represents a wide variety of national and international research associations. And for us in ERA, this is particularly important. We see ourselves providing a space that brings together the richness of the wide variety of research traditions that exist within Europe. We don't seek to homogenize educational research. We seek to acknowledge what makes it contextually valid and contextually rich, while at the same time trying to bring it together at a European level and beyond indeed, to see if we can develop some sort of European dimension to research and some sort of European approach. From your conference program, it's obvious to see that many of the themes that are internationally relevant also have resonance at a Turkish level. And in the same way, many of the specifically Turkish themes will undoubtedly speak to the controversies, complexities, and ideas that are dominating the rest of educational research in Europe and perhaps beyond. And in some ways, the title you've chosen for your conference is an excellent example of this. Teacher Education Policy in the 21st Century, Evidence, Research and Practice is an idea and a thematic area that would resonate deeply with the whole ERA community. We see ourselves, and indeed it's our motto, our tagline, as engaging in research for the benefit of society. And in many ways, teacher education is a key forum where the research that we do within ERA and within all our associations, within all our networks, has an opportunity to benefit society in a very direct way and in a very specific way. I think the idea of presenting teacher education in a new century is a very, very important statement. It's an identification that the 21st century challenges teacher education, and the challenges in teacher education will be of central importance to how we think about our education systems, to how we think maybe about our broader social structures in many ways. It recognises the profound change that's taken place in teacher education in recent years. There was a time, perhaps when I was doing teacher education myself, when teacher education was seen as being a time-limited qualification period. You trained to be a teacher, you then became a teacher, and then you taught. But now it's seen more as a process or a continuum. There's a recognition that teachers never really stop learning about what it means to be a teacher. They learn in their initial period of teacher education, when they're in higher education institutions, when they engage in practicum, when they have the opportunity to work with mentor teachers, when they have the opportunity to learn what it means to actually be an educator. They learn also in their early years teaching, when they move from that period maybe of protected engagement with schools to a full engagement, when they're new teachers, when they're in an induction phase, when they have the benefit, hopefully, of the experience and the knowledge of their colleagues within schools, and when they bring their new experiences and their new knowledge to school communities and enrich them with new ideas and new approaches. And also, as they go on through their career, teachers are continuously learning, both formally and informally. And it is important that we have the opportunity to provide teachers with the most up-to-date ideas, with the most up-to-date approaches, with the most up-to-date insights into how they can become more effective, more fulfilled, and more successful teachers. And I think this period of change is a significant one, and it's recognized in the title of your conference. Because in some ways we have to ask, what does this mean for those working in a system and for those engaging in a system? Change and change management, indeed, are two of the constant themes, I think, of our societies over the last number of decades and the last number of years. And managing change and engaging with change is complex, challenging, but also can be rewarding. But we need to think about this. We as researchers and we as a research community need to think about, what does it mean to engage with a system that's undergoing change? And of course, to answer this, we need evidence. We need evidence of the impact of changes. We need evidence of why we're engaging in change. And we need evidence in relation to, what does change mean for those who are taking part in it? We also need research to underpin this evidence, because research provides the evidence in and of itself, but it also gives us the tools and the skills to assess the validity and the value of the evidence that we're using. And also then we need to focus on, well, what is the impact of these changes at a practice level, or indeed, to use your own word, at a praxis level. And therefore, I think it's not insignificant that, as well as looking at teacher education in the 21st century, you're using three particular lenses: those of evidence, those of research, and those of praxis. Three key and central and indeed linked ideas that will help those engaged in teacher education in Turkey and perhaps beyond rethink about what we're doing and why we're doing it. The concept of evidence is one of those that has become very current over the last 25 to 30 years, and it's deceptively simple. I mean, people quite often ask you to provide the evidence about what you're doing. And we have a lot of different, maybe buzzwords, buzz ideas, ideas that, and policies and approaches to research that have become dominant in many of our different ways of looking at education. We have evidence-based practice, which is seen as being critically important in many aspects of what we do, not just in education, but across many other different fields of human endeavor. We have evidence-based policy. Many governments and many political and social organizations commit to basing their policy on the evidence that's available and on the best evidence to ensure that what we're doing and why we're doing it will lead to, in their opinion, the best results. We also have evidence-based governance. It's a key area that is emerging in terms of how we explore, say, quality assurance systems and indeed systems as a whole. But the idea of evidence is ubiquitous. It's one of those easy words to use. It's one of those easy concepts to sell. We need evidence in order to improve what we're doing, and evidence and good evidence will lead to improvement. And it has become commonplace in our policy discussions. But of course, one of the challenges to this is, well, how do we actually get evidence? And arguably the second lens that you've chosen to use is the key one here. Because I think all good evidence is based on good research. And it's at the heart of what we as research associations do, both you at a Turkish level and we at a European level in partnership with our associations around Europe. And again, research is a deceptively simple idea. Many of us spend our entire careers engaging in research and conducting research. But often it's sometimes better just to ask the questions about research rather than to talk about it, I think, as we would all be experts doing. So who does the research? In the context of teacher education, who engages in research? In many countries, we now have a very strong practitioner research movement, where those who are engaging within research or within practice have the opportunity to develop their own research ideas and to present their own research ideas, to present their own evidence based around their practice. It's been an enormously important and enriching area. And yet in other areas and in other fields, and perhaps in areas that are linked more directly to policy, we have large-scale international and national research conducted by experts such as ourselves, but maybe sometimes experts from different fields and from different areas, even from different countries. So the who of research is a fascinating one. The what does it mean is also a fascinating idea. How do you interpret research? How do we decide that this research means X rather than Y? It's an enormous challenge, and the context where we're doing this often changes what we understand and what we mean by research. Who owns the research is becoming an increasingly important area. Is the research in the ownership of those who do it? Is it in the ownership of those who fund it? Is it in the ownership of those who it is applied to? And engaging in teacher education research, that question is a really important one. Who owns the research that is conducted in schools? Who owns the research that is conducted with teachers, by teachers, for teachers, and on teachers? A very important area. Of course, the whole issue of validity. How do we decide if the research is valid, linking back to evidence? How do we decide that the research that we engage in allows us conduct positive, good, and important policy outcomes and develop those policy outcomes? Is there a validity there? There's the technical side that all of you will be aware of around validity as a research concept, but there's also the validity in terms of the culture and the cultural context and the practical policy and governance context that we're trying to make use of the research or that we're trying to conduct the research in. And of course, what is valued and by whom is it valued? What do we value in terms of research? All of us as educational researchers are aware of the significant amount of time and effort that goes into producing up-to-date, relevant, valid and valued research. But at times, I think we've all had that experience where the highly complex and competent research that we engage in doesn't seem to go anywhere. And why is that? Is that an issue that is our own fault as researchers? Are we unable to communicate what we do as researchers? Or is it a situation that perhaps despite the statements about the value of evidence, that perhaps only certain sorts of evidence is valued and only certain sorts of evidence is valued in relation to specific policy areas? And that's a huge challenge again in teacher education. Many of us who are engaged in teacher education research understand the complexities of it, understand the challenges of it, and sometimes policy maybe it appears to oversimplify some of it. And of course, then who values it? Does the value of research engaging in teacher education, is it valued by our teaching colleagues, for example? Or are we seeing those of us who engage in research as living in ivory towers, who are unable to speak directly to the needs of the practicing teacher in the classroom, or the practicing initial teacher education student who sits in front of us as we engage in their initial period of formation? And these are vitally important subjects. And perhaps then the question we ask ourselves here is, how do we translate this research, is a critical one. And your third concept, that of praxis, is perhaps a bridge between this. It's a bridge between what we engage in as researchers and also between what is important within the classroom. And you as a community clearly recognize the centrality of the practice domain as a location for the implementation of the research that either you're conducting on schools or you conduct with schools, or indeed that schools conduct themselves. And if we go back to the original Aristotelian idea around praxis, I think the focus that you have on the doing element, separating it from the thinking and the making, is very important here. That doing is central to our idea of what it means to be a praxis-focused research community. That we reflect on our actions as we do them, and then we try and find a way to implement what we do. So the idea of the ivory tower researcher, the idea of the ivory tower academic who engages in research only for its own purpose, which has a value. Perhaps there's also a value, and you clearly state this by looking at the praxis element, there's also a value in engaging in that type of research in schools, and engaging in and with schools and with teachers and with teacher education students around this area. And I think that this is important because at least my experience and the experience of many of us working within education research throughout Europe is that teacher educators and teacher education students are looking for research that speaks to them, that speaks to their praxis experience, that speaks to what they encounter every day, both in the initial phase of their teacher education lives, but also in the subsequent years, in their early years in schools, and in the years when they are more experienced and yet face new challenges, and when they have new ideas and new policies and new structures being implemented, sometimes with or sometimes without necessarily the background and the support that is perhaps needed for that. So I wish you all the best at your conference. I hope that you have an enjoyable academic time. I hope you have an enjoyable social time. I am very sorry that I can't be there to join you this year. Unfortunately, I have other commitments for the week of your conference. However, I do look forward to joining you in the future. Best wishes for an excellent conference. Best wishes for for a good conference that brings you new ideas, that brings you new connections, that brings you new experiences. And please be assured that all of us in ERA are looking forward to meeting you at some of our future conferences. Our next one, if you'll forgive my advert, is in Hamburg in September, and we hope that as many of you will join us at the European Educational Research Conference in Hamburg in September. Thank you once again, and best wishes for an excellent conference.